Okay, once again, my outstanding friends, this is another shocker du jour. But if you've been following me, you understand it. Evolution is a theory that just doesn't hold up. It just doesn't hold up. To create this kind of sophistication and this kind of literally programming inside of DNA and genes to create this spectacular physiology that is just, it's so incredible that I can't ever even imagine how it could have developed at all, but it certainly didn't develop in a warm, slimy petri dish, which is what Yale and all the rest of them claim. However, they do agree now that the origin of the universe is not what they thought. This Big Bang is way wrong. And the Webb telescope saying they can see to the other end of the galaxies and the universe and all this stuff, it's just not true. Because light slows down. It doesn't keep going the same speed. There's absolutely no question about that. No question whatsoever. And every single thing that they base the Webb telescope on is the speed of light is consistent and space is a complete vacuum, and it is just not true. So where does that leave us? Looking for an explanation. Who designed the universe? If there was a designer, was there a creator? Where does he live? If it's a he. How did they do it? How did they program all these things? So the sophistication is just beyond human comprehension. And I am the one that studies this biology in the depths that most doctors don't. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you, that's a fact. They say here, the guy says he's sick doing this, give him a couple of these pills. Well, maybe they know a lot about what biology tells them, but I'm going to tell you right now, biology does not understand even the interstitium, which was just announced in 2018, a brand new organ in the human body. And I think I found another one too, that controls the fluids that go in between every single organ, because every organ has its own cancer. And I believe every organ has its own chemistry. And if that chemistry is not right for that particular organ, it'll get invaded, you'll get cancer. Same thing with autism and every other disease. If you don't have the enzymes, because you don't have the bacteria, you will be invadable. And you won't be able to create the products you need to support your life. Enzymes are the key to everything, and bacteria is the only thing that creates the enzymes. It's not your pancreas, your liver, your this or that. No, it's the bacteria living in that factory that do the production. You don't have the bacteria, you don't produce. You don't produce, you don't have the enzymes. You don't have the enzymes, you're sick. Okay, I know this is all about trying to figure out who God is and where we came from and evolution and, all that nonsense, creation. But everything plays into everything else because we are constructed creatures. We're built from a sperm and an egg, and then we just grow to be what we are. That requires an unbelievable set of programs that just work with whatever rolls into that body. And that program says we need to build bones, we need this, we need tissue, we need eyeballs, and it all happens just from that sperm and egg combining together. That is it's an absolute miracle. And I mean miracle on steroids. So how do I explain that can happen? Well, it all happens in the microbiome. It happens in your gut. Your gut houses bacteria. Bacteria do everything in your body for the chemistry. Without those, you're done. Bacteria, as far as I'm concerned right now, bacteria, viruses, and funguses, those are God's programmers. All right? You listen to what I'm saying? They're God's workers and programmers. They program your body, the viruses and the bacteria. They program the creatures that live in there to deal with whatever comes into that body. It's the most elegant, unbelievable system. And when you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, there's no way to believe it, actually. But it's happening. I know it's happening. I'm pretty sure it's happening. Life is life. It doesn't evolve like they say it evolves, from a slimy little thing and then it just gets bigger and smarter and grows hands and fingers and eyeballs. No, 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 no. Way, 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 way wrong. All right. Now, not only does the microbiome build your body from the sperm and egg, it affects everything in your body, how good you feel and how unhappy and everything about you. Everything about you is controlled by the enzymes, and we are assaulting the bacteria that make those enzymes. So this plays in to God's program. We have gone outside of the realm of what's allowed within God's program, and now we are assaulting our own bodies by doing the things we're doing. I'm just telling you, that's just fact. All right, I asked if bacteria are the factories that create enzymes, and yes, they're the factories for enzymes. They are living organisms, naturally produce a wide variety of enzymes, 75,000 that they know of, essential for many biological processes. Enzymes can be used for various applications, Now, why are they considered the factories? Natural production, diverse enzyme production, easy cultivation. They just do it automatically. That's their job. And now they want to use them, of course, in industrial things to make and break products down so that they can build things synthetically. But in your body, it does it automatically and creates these enzymes. But you have to have the bacteria. You don't have the bacteria, you get no enzyme. All right, what happens in the human body is absolutely stunning. This is the pancreas, this is the liver. We got all kinds of things going on. The enzymes of the pancreatic juices, there's just a ton of enzymes squirting out of here, all kinds of stuff. And it happens all throughout your body, it's not just here. There's secretions of enzymes. Enzymes do the work that particular organ is designed to do. And when I say this is amazing, gastric juices for an ulcer, stomach juices, all the different, how your body works, and even like all these different layers of tissue that are in your organs and your intestines and your colon and all that, how they absorb. This is not nothing. This is serious business. Look at this, islets of Langerhans. The pancreas makes enzymes. They all make enzymes. If you don't have the bacteria, you're not going to get the enzymes. It's very, very, very simple. You see, this just isn't true. This is correct. Enzymes are complicated molecules, very complicated, made of many amino acids in a precise chain and then all folded together to make a ribosome. Now, enzymes only come from bacteria. False. All living things make enzymes. No. The bacteria in that living thing, in those little factories that they call the pancreas, the thymus, and all these other places, the liver, everywhere, creates these enzymes because there's bacteria living in there. If you kill the bacteria in that organ, it will not create the enzyme. The organ will be there, it just won't work right. Enzymes can't form naturally. False. Simple precursors, simple to enzymes, can form abiotically, without biological. Complex enzymes evolved gradually. See, they always want to figure out something to support this slimy petri dish idea of evolution. It's just not true. Enzymes are required for life, true, essential for metabolism, DNA replication, etc. You will die within minutes without the enzymes. And that's what acute radiation sickness is. If you get blasted with acute radiation, which means those high-powered particles, and all of this is like a pulse, you don't fall over dead. I don't think you feel much of anything. But then about 2 hours later, you start throwing up and having diarrhea and vomiting and gas and cramps, and all your enzymes are not being produced because your bacteria is dead. It kills the bacteria. Bacteria cannot survive that pulse. And if you look it up, you got to do a lot of deep research on this. Human cells have the capability to repair themselves, plus they're more resistant to that, and the bacteria is not. The bacteria is dead gone. Case is closed for them. We have a little bit of a different capability to deal with that. So without your enzymes, you're done. And we're assaulting our bacteria. Bacteria is a little on the fragile side. Okay, just to finish up with this. When you get a high dose of radiation and in a quick exposure time and a high pulse, it can cause, they say, DNA and cell damage. Yes, radiation ionizes atoms, breaking chemical bonds in the DNA and cells. Not as much as with the enzyme, bacteria. These are our cells they're talking about. Rapidly dividing cells in the gut, skin, bone marrow are hit hardest. Well, they need enzymes to do their rapid division. Immune system collapse. Bone marrow is destroyed. You can't make enough white blood cells. Infection risk skyrockets. Your body gets sick because of this. Primarily, it loses ability to repair itself fast enough. It can't repair fast enough. It's damaged, but the enzymes are not there because the bacteria is dead, not producing them. They are used up very quickly, it appears. The gut lining breaks down, leading to vomiting, diarrhea, bacterial infections, and then in a short time you don't really feel a whole lot, but within minutes to hours you start getting nausea, vomiting, headache, fatigue, and that's because you killed your bacteria. And then 1 to 2 days later you might feel okay, sort of. Now 3 to 10 days later you could get high fever, bloody diarrhea, infections, internal bleeding, hair loss, confusion. You've killed all the bacteria that is creating the enzymes to do all those jobs. And then you lose your organ failure. You go into coma, possibly death. And that's from acute radiation exposure going through your body, not necessarily killing you, but killing the bacteria that makes the enzymes that supports your life. All right, we all know what DNA is. It's the double strand of DNA proteins that make up who you are and how your body's constructed, and if you have 2 eyeballs and all that stuff. How much of that DNA, those codes, which is just unbelievable number of codes in there, how many of those are dedicated to the construction of the human body and all of its intricacies, which I just showed you, which are many and varied in just this one little area. Now, how much of that is dedicated to doing reconstructing the human body? Only about 1 to 2% of the human genome directly codes for proteins, essential building blocks of the human body, including the organs, tissues, enzymes, and hormones. Now, so that makes the building blocks. Now, then you're going to put them together to make certain things and all of these different organs and all that stuff. So they're saying only 1 to 2% codes for all of that stuff. And there's, I think they're calling for 22,000 different proteins, but there's a lot more. They're not even close, I don't think. In my mind, I could be wrong. Here's what they're saying. So what does the body-building DNA do? 1 to 2% of the code is responsible for making about 22,000 proteins, which build tissue like skin, muscle, bone, regulate organs, drive development. That's only 2%. They could create the enzymes, the kidney, to transport proteins, create all that stuff. 1 to 2% of your DNA. And then they say regulatory DNA uses between 5 and 10%, just as important. This is what turns on and off the genes in your body. It decides when and where and how much of each gene is expressed. And there's an enzyme that expresses them. It's called methylase. I think it's something like that. I think it's methylase. It methylates, which means to turn it off. Actually, it doesn't turn them on. They turn them off. When they're methylated, they're turned off, I believe. When you unmethylate them, but it requires a protein, an enzyme to do that. You have to and then the gene becomes expressed. Otherwise, it just sits there, does nothing. If you can't come along and turn it on, it just doesn't turn on. So not only does it require the enzymes that do the job, it requires being turned on. And that's the methylase. I believe. I can't remember exactly, but I'm sort of winging this. But I understand this pretty good. I went to Johns Hopkins for genomics, but you can understand all this stuff. You don't have to go to have anybody tell you anything. You can understand anything you want on the internet now, and you can source it from many different places. Don't just use AI. Go and look specifically at papers and so forth, because this. Sometimes I can see that it's just not giving a whole lot of correct answers. Now, other unknown, non-coding is 90% plus. They don't know what it does. Well, I think I know what it does. Because if you could see the organization of the human body and all of that specific, unbelievable complexity is done with 1 to 2%. Plus, it controls your emotions. It controls your sight and your sense of taste and touch, hormones. Everything is done with 1 to 2%. 98%. They don't know what it does. I think I know what it does, and I think it's pretty damn important. Okay, listen to this now. You got identical twins. They come from the same cell. The cell splits in half, and you have the two sets of DNA are identical when that happens. Now, they can change a tiny, tiny bit, but I don't know if they change inside the womb. Now listen to what it says. Are identical twins born with identical DNA? Yes, mostly. Identical twins come from a single fertilized egg, splits into 2 embryos. This means they start with the same DNA, so they're absolutely identical in the beginning. The same genetic blueprint from the same sperm and egg. So we're pretty sure that's true. Now, but they're not 100% identical. And they say, why is that? Scientists found that early mutations can occur. So they're identical, and then an early mutation, so if something does happen. What happens, what, and why? Well, let's see if we can figure it out. He says, as the embryo divides, spontaneous mutations can happen in one twin but not the other. Is one twin being affected by some enzyme and the other didn't get hit by that? Or some kind of bacteria going on that one didn't get exposed to and the other did? And it will happen coming out through the vaginal canal and so forth. One may be exposed to something the other's not exposed to. So when they're born, they come out a little bit different, and it's because of the environment they're coming through. So one of them might get feces on it and the other one doesn't. That type of thing. Now, so these are called somatic mutations. They can result in tiny DNA differences, little tiny bits. This is a very sophisticated set of molecules. I mean, I'm talking, you don't even have a clue. All right, so then what happens after that? You got epigenetic differences emerge. Well, what does that mean? Even if the DNA sequence is nearly identical, gene expression can differ. Remember we talked about methylation? Here it is right here. Epigenetics, like DNA methylation, which only happens from an enzyme, controls how genes are turned on and off. And this can vary based on environment, nutrition, or chance. There it is right there, environment, nutrition. It's if you have been exposed to the right methylase or whatever it causes it, you're in good shape. Now, you got mitochondrial DNA differences. Now, this mitochondria is the energy factory, all right? Mitochondria, the cell's energy factories. Every cell has a little factory in there, produces energy. They have their own DNA. So the mitochondria has its own special DNA, and the mutations there can differ slightly between twins. Well, maybe. Chimerism, which is rare. A rare case in a twin can carry some cells with a different genetic signature, adding to the difference. Now, they may give them blood transfusions or something when they're having their babies and so forth. Who knows what happens to them? But the key here is they're born identical. Something changes. And the only thing that can change the structural, well, here's where it gets tricky. Because I don't think the structural DNA changes. I'd like to see some evidence of that. However, all the byproduct of the DNA that's not structural and assigned, I don't think that stuff changes. So in other words, you're not going to grow an extra toe, that type of thing. But you may have a mood problem, but you're probably going to have constipation or some other issue. Because constipation, I have found that causes irritability. And not just because it's uncomfortable, but because something happens in your body. That's what the research indicates to me. And if you don't have a correct microbiome working, you're done. Something's going to happen. You're not going to be healthy. You're going to be unhappy. You're going to be, all kinds of things happen to you because of that microbiome not working the digestion correctly. You don't have the right digestion. You don't have the right components to do the job. You cannot support your immune system. You can't use the proteins that create the bones and the muscle and so forth that keeps you really fit and physical. You can't digest your food. You have all kinds of colon issues and perforations. All kinds of things happen there if the bacteria isn't there to do the breakdown of these products and to deal with the virulence of some of this stuff. We eat all kinds of things that just try to attack us. And people, they think it's fun to eat all these things. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But I can tell you what. If you're not digesting correctly, you have diarrhea, vomiting, a lot of gas, a lot of odor, you're just not digesting correctly. You got to replace the bacteria. That's the whole key. We need bacterial database, and then we need to be able to use fecal matter transplant information and then cultivate it. You don't have to take it out of somebody's body. Once you know that specific species of bacteria has this certain effect, and everybody that has a big hive here, they're really in trouble. Well, you got to find something to either counteract that, or if it's needed, you have to find something to produce it. Once you isolate it, and what can work both ways, then you just produce them in vats. And you're not, and it should be consistent, and there should be no health concerns about it. Once all it is bacteria that's supposed to be living in you. If you have too much of the bad stuff, you're in trouble. Probably if you have too much of the good stuff, you're in trouble. But I don't see why we shouldn't be able to take a fecal swab, almost like, actually you should be able to poop and take a picture of it with a cell phone and send it off to AI and have it analyze it, and it'll tell by the spectroscopy, and even they could drill down in there and actually see the structure of maybe even parasites and who knows what. But that has to be developed. It's not developed yet, I don't think. But I know they can do these deep dive into the poop and see what's in there. What kind of bacteria? And it'll all light up different colors depending upon what different species are. We don't have to give them names or anything. Who cares about that? But if you got a lot of this yellow, bright yellow on a certain spectrum, and every one of those persons has Alzheimer's, well, you know you got an issue there. Or if you see the little yellow down here and every person has Alzheimer's, well, you need to make that yellow come up to here. There's going to be a way to deal with this, but you have to have a database and you have to have a way to analyze this poop and see what's in there. What bacteria is residing in there means what enzymes. What enzymes means what turns on and off and builds your body, does the immune system. It all happens in the interstitium, which is they just announced in 2018. They didn't even know that organ was in your body. Now it's the biggest organ in the human body. Is the interstitium, and that's the fluid-filled highway. And that's where all this stuff resides. They don't understand it. They even think that it's not good They think that that's what transports cancer. It's not. The cancer goes wherever nothing can stop it, and it can break through. The cancer isn't just transferred and everybody's going to get cancer. No, the cancer inside your body is regulated by the enzymes. So if it can break through one spot, it can break through over there too. It doesn't just travel around through your body and become what they call metastasized and just goes everywhere. Well, it will go everywhere. If there's nothing to protect it here, why wouldn't it not go there, go everywhere? That's what it's about. And usually they refer to skin cancer, but skin cancer, they've been treating with fecal matter transplants. As a matter of fact, if you put any disease in, I don't care what it is, peanut butter allergies, anything, and fecal matter transplants, and see what is the latest on the research, and every single one of them says that it's promising, but it needs more research. Every one of them. And they also, we need more research, more research. Well, I don't see them doing the research that's required, and I see them fighting back against the implementation of this stuff. And open biome, I think it was open biome, I think that's the one, yeah, I believe, I'm not certain, but they were providing fecal matter transplant material and trying to get an approval process, and finally they gave up. This was just in October 2024, they gave up because they said the product works fabulous and everything's fine, there's no problems and everything, but they couldn't get it through the paperwork, through our own government. And they're the ones that have been pushing back against this. It's hard to believe, but it is true. Very hard to believe, but true. All right, listen to this now, and listen very, very carefully. This is enzymes. Some enzymes can make their conversion of substrate to product occur many millions of times faster than they would without the enzyme. They would happen, but it would just take millions. In this case, an extreme example is prime 5-phosphate decarbylase, which allows a reaction that would otherwise take millions of years to occur, happens in thousandths of 1 second. Otherwise, it would take millions of years to occur. Do you know how important that enzyme is? And this is one of the most important enzymes in your whole body. It works with your membranes. You see what it's working with? Hold on a second. Hold on. See, this is another case where the doctors don't understand what's going on here. They're talking about this OMP decarboxylase is involved in a biosynthesis, which means synthesizing biology, creating new products, but not directly associated with membranes. They think it has to be anchored in the membrane to be directly associated to it. It's not. It's a free-floating enzyme. Now, but you need it. The substrate OMP is a phosphorylated molecule. That's the membrane. And the enzyme interacts with that phosphoryl group, because your membranes are phospholipids. Phosphorus on the top, phosphorus on the bottom, lipids in the middle. Phosphorus is the key component of cell membranes in the form of phospholipids, which form the lipid bilayer, 2 layers. And in between is the fluids. Now, however, here's what they say. However, the connection between OMP decarboxylase and phosphorus in membranes is indirect. Relating to the enzyme's role is synthesizing nucleotides that are incorporated into nucleic acids, which are floating in this fluid, which are involved in various cellular processes, including those related to membranes. Well, they're just dancing around with words. They are the main enzyme in the membranes. Essentially, OMP decarboxylase is a systolic enzyme. Well, what does that mean? What does systolic enzyme mean? Well, here's what it means. It's an enzyme that functions in the systolic fluid. It's just floating around. It's just waiting to do a job. It's everywhere, and it's in the membranes specifically. All right, and it acts on a phosphorylated substrate to produce a nucleotide, eventually be used to build DNA and RNA. While DNA and RNA are involved in cellular processes, including those related to membrane function, the enzyme itself doesn't reside within the membrane. It resides in the fluids. It's in the membrane. It's not exactly where it is all the time. They float around. These little ribosomes, which are the enzymes, they float around throughout the body. They're free floaters. And they don't poop. They don't eat. They just wait to be tickled to turn on. Okay, I know, an extremely incredible claim, but I claim, well, I know for a fact this is a human lung, a mudfossil. It's been DNA tested. It's heavy, dense pleura that coats the lung. All that stuff coats the alveoli of the lung. It's very, very dense. And this, my friends, is some of that pleura. Like here. Those right there are alveoli. This is a membrane that coats down to where the alveoli start, right under here. And that's the same with those. You see those little round spots? You see? These are those. Same stuff. On top of that would be a thick pleura, and I mean it's thick. It's not something thin, and this is the pleura. And I have a lung here that's partially deteriorated. I can show you how thick that pleura is. All right, first of all, this is the one that has a complete coating of pleura, very, very dense. That's where the heart was. Died in a great flood. That's why it's so flat in the back. It died laying just like this. And it literally boiled the flesh off because of the conditions of the flood. Underneath that pleura, underneath this is that. This one solidified in a totally different manner without any pleura on it. And then I have one here that's half and half. That's the pleura. You see the thickness of that? This is thick stuff. You're doing this all day long, all day long, all day long, your whole entire life. And if you don't, well, that's the end of your entire life. Same thing here, flat as a pancake because of the great flood. Now, for something, this brushed against it or scraped against it or whatever happened, but it pushed the pleura back. And that's where we have the alveoli right there. That's this lung right here. With the alveoli rolled back. This is almost an anatomical picture. You see it over there? It's just, it looks like an anatomical picture. I have it rolled back just like that one. Now, I've shown this many, many times. This is that lung right there. And I drilled into there to get the blood out of here, so that I don't take it from the surface. But I can still get blood out of here. I just dug into that the other day on a video. I don't know if you can see how red that is. And it just raw blood came out of there. You see how flat it is? They're all flat like that because of the great flood. It died like this. And it's DNA tested, and it's been CAT scanned. I mean, there's no question what it is. It's a lung. Now, and this is the pleura, which is the coating, the rubber bag. Now, originally I called it fascia-facilitated fossilization because this is, you could call this fascia as well. Same stuff. Collagens, keratins, fibers. It's that fabric. It's the elastins that do the job, and they are membranes. And all the chemistry now, I've been doing the deep chemistry about, well, hold on. All right, this is on the top of that, what I claim to be a lung. Now look at this outline. That I claim to be an alveoli. Now I'm going to wipe it down, and you see how it maintains itself in this red area here? That is red blood. Now it's kind of scratched up. I should polish it, but I'm a little afraid to polish it because I'm going to lose this texture. I can feel that. You see this? If I polish, I'm going to lose the texture. You see the texture? That's what's inside an alveoli. All that blood is filtering all the way through there. Hold on, let me see if I can focus this. All right. This is the alveoli. Now this is on top of that big block with all those layers that I showed you. This is where all the blood filters in through here to make its exchange to whatever it was exchanging to. You know, well, the red and the black have to exchange the blue and the red in the body, but it turns black in mud fossils, primarily. Well, almost always. Now, that looks pretty apparent to me. I'm going to see if I can find another one that looks good. But like I say, I'm afraid to buff it. I was thinking about doing it, but because there's a lot of, you see all these tool marks, it was just cut across. Well, I hate to lose that. Look at the definition. Look at the colors. You see that? I'm going to turn it. I'm going to play around with the light. Hold on. It's just blood red. That's what it does. That's what a lung does. Now watch this. I'm going to go. Whoops. Just barely with a little bit of light. You can see that's exactly what you'd expect to see, and it is what you do see. And the brighter and brighter I turn it up, the less red you see. When you come down in the lower light range, the red comes up because it's red. And this is a yellow. So this was where transpiration was happening, where you respirate. All right, so if this was a lung, you got to have black blood, and you're going to have red blood, and you're going to have yellow as it transpires. Now, what's going on there? I don't know. But I can clearly see those colors, as you can. Refocus this in a little better. I think that's pretty good. Now don't forget, all of that stuff is from where it was cut. And again, I don't want to lose some of the detail here, because believe it or not, there's detail that you don't see. You think they're just scratches. Some of it, yes, some of it, no. Just going straight up there, that little line. I don't understand that. And these are, wherever you see these little patches, it's somewhere like on the outer layer of the alveoli. It's a little bit different, as I showed you before, and they'll have little borders around them. Now let me dry that up a little bit. There's so much to the, you got to pay attention to the details, and it's hard. It really is. You see that? That's not normal. Something there is not. This was a little piece of a tendon or something, because it cut across here and everything cut fine except that. Or maybe that's a little trench. No, it's a ridge. That's a ridge. So something was different there. Now, I can see this clearly was blood, and it's transitioning over to the, or the black is transitioning over to the red through the yellow. And here's another one of the alveoli. So I think I'm making a pretty good case that this was the outer membrane, which is the pleura of a lung. You see these? That's a different one. There's a whole batch of these. You see that one? And again, if I buffed it, I'm going to lose that. I could feel it. It's very distinct. When I first felt it, I said, wow, what the hell is that? And you see over here? They're all like that, and that's because we're down just touching the alveoli. All right, as crazy as it sounds, I just showed you these are the alveoli in the surface of the lung, which would be right there. We are just skimming the surface of the lung. Above that is what they call the visceral pleura. And that's not just one little thing. On this, it's all of this is the visceral pleura. All right, from where it touches the alveoli up to the end of that lower membrane, which is called the visceral pleura. So there's not just one layer, there's a whole bunch of layers. Now, what's above that? The intrapleural space. This here, that is it right there. It's just nothing but fluid, basically. And then what's above that is the parietal pleura, which is up the top. So what we were looking at is right there. All of those are the alveoli. You see them? You can actually see the little round circles. Those are the alveoli. So here we are right there. Well, actually, it's easier to see on this side. We're touching up against the alveoli. Above that is this layer. Well, on the end is the easiest to see. You got to go for the easiest way. And you can see it here on the end. That's the interpleural space, that big wide highlight. Then above that is the parietal pleura. And then above that is just like some gooey stuff, mucus and so forth. Doesn't seem to have any structure to it. But it sits right exactly on top of that membrane. And nothing but membrane, and then that intrapleural space. And then more visceral pleura down there. Visceral pleura, that's tough. Viscera. Viscera means tough. All right, if I haven't shown you this, I've shown this hundreds and hundreds of times. It is a 2-inch wide hair follicle. That's where the erector pili muscle attaches, right there. Makes your hair stand up on end. That's the hair shaft. And you see all that little wrinkly stuff around it? That's what's around your hair. Your skin is literally made out of clay. It flakes off just like clay would flake off. This right here is a sebaceous gland. Right there. That is what oils up the shaft. Down here is where the root shaft comes down. The root ball is at the bottom, and you have the hair papilla, red and black, little dots there. Now you see the whole thing is yellow, and you say, well, how come you don't have these different colors? Well, this is nucleophilic transition, which means it's been invaded in certain conditions where the pH, the temperature, the length of time it was in there, what it was associated to, was it close to just clay, was it close to metals, or whatever happens is it gets invaded. It's called nucleophilic substitution by invasion. It invades it with these molecules that are looking for something to become stable with, and they find it in the tissue because the tissue would normally become stable with certain molecules. Now, over the course of this, though, it's a little different. This was like boiled clean and then filled because the earth was literally boiled. And they all say it now. I think Harvard had a thing about it, MIT, or I think all of them did, but I could be wrong. I know that some of them did anyway. And there's no question it happened. There was a boiling of the oceans, which created a red bed worldwide, which was the boiled flesh. The literal flesh boiled out, caused a red bed, which has all my mud fossils turned flat because the flesh boiled off. The fascia facilitated this fossilization. And if you look up fascia facilitated fossilization on YouTube, on academia.edu, I have a paper up there from 2015 about this. So these are giants. Mine are giants. I have giants, two of them that were DNA tested. One of them has a 3-foot long fingertip with the fingerprints and fingernails still on it. Human DNA, excellent quality. I had to break down, go inside to get the DNA. And I go inside of the other ones too. I don't take it off the surface. All right, so I did it right. I did it the right way, and I have the tests. They're all done. The CAT scans are done. Anyway, we have giant biology. There's absolutely no question. And they call it geology. Well, no, that is biology turned hard. And this is just stunningly large. And that was where the lung was, inside. And that had to go along with it. That's why it's so dense and pleural. Pleural is tough. That's why these guys can play football and smash their lungs and everything all day long, and it just doesn't seem to bother them. I don't know, maybe it does. But that's where the alveoli are, inside the lung. Okay, let's take a tour down this side of this membrane. I'm going to draw it up. You guys are mud fossil people, you know what you're looking at. You see this? That's not because of these cut marks. These are little divots in the actual layers of membrane. You see how detailed these are? This is just one little area. You see how you go boom, 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 and there's like there's just not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 50. There's hundreds of them that you don't see. Now, I'm just barely getting into this thing. Now we're hitting this layer right here, which is the fluid-filled highway, and it's just nothing there of tissue, and then you get to the other side and you're back into the tissue again. So this is the layer that they say they discovered, which is the interstitium. It really holds the lymph fluids, and there is a ton of it that surrounds your lungs. And you see all these layer, and we keep going down, 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 down. Down, down, down. Now we're getting almost right onto the lung, onto the alveoli. And that's where, right here is where the alveoli starts. Right in this area right here. I might be able to find some on the side. Whoops. I got to turn this around. Well, you can see we're getting right into where the alveoli is there. Let me just bring it over here. Now I'm going to rock it towards, this is where you got some really, the viscera. That's the real tough stuff. It surrounds. Well, I'm going to tip this over so you don't lose contact with the visual. And here we are at the alveoli side. Boom. There they are. They're taking on red blood, well, oxygen to make the blood red. Let me put a little water on there. This is so cool. This is what makes me really excited about this. And you're always going to find a little, the black is transpiring and picking up the oxygen. You see there's a little bit of black there. There's another one there. I mean, they're all over. It's not like I can't find them. And they all have this webbing inside, which is what picks up the oxygen. Yeah. And this is the surrounding of it, apparently. There's another one there. And And that's actually, well, anyway, you see what it is. It's changing the colors, and when it changes its colors, it means it's changing the oxygenation state of the blood. So it goes from red to black. And here's some black down here. Well, it goes from, when you inhale oxygen, it mixes somehow through the capillaries and turns the black blood red. It absorbs it. And there's enzymes involved in here. There's got to be a ton of enzymes involved, because it does it immediately. Zip, it sucks that particle right up. That doesn't happen in nature like that so fast. You can't just push something to something else and all of a sudden takes it on instantly. No, this is enzymes. All right, some people can't breathe well. They have a problem breathing. It might be just they don't have the right bacteria in their body making the right enzymes. You see this? We saw this before. That's something. I'm not sure what the heck is going on here. I'm going to have to look a little deeper, but I think that's some kind of a blood vessel or something. You see it? See that little tube running up there? I don't know what that is, and if it has anything to do with a vein. It sure looks like a tube to me. And that whole thing there stepped off when it was cut. Everything else cut fine except for that spot. Why? Well, we know that black blood turns very, very hard. And that's probably it right there. It's just very, very hard. Black blood is called magnetite. And when it hardens up, it turns hard. The red blood stays very soft. And you know, it's very, very soft. And it just runs right out. You see it? There's a lot to understand here, and it's not hard to understand it. It's just nobody has the mindset to be able to get to this level of understanding, because it's too much for the average human mind to accept. And I understand how difficult this is, but when you're approached with reality and you can't accept reality, that also is a serious issue. Look at this. Isn't that something? And here's the black right over here. Somehow it's transpiring between the two. And then it pumps through, you know, all the different organs and picks up all the other stuff it needs, goes out to do its work, and it comes back around. All right, I was called away, so I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. We were talking about giant biology. I showed you the membranes, I showed you the pleura, I showed you the alveoli. I'm absolutely certain of that. And I maybe didn't show you this, which this is the colored section of tissue, which I believe that's the skin, and the membrane down here. Fluid-filled highway, more membrane, and these are the highways in and out, and then the fluid-filled bags of enzymes, basically, where the production of these things happen, and then more membranes over here. This is really quite a simplified version. It looks like it's real, but I would suspect it's probably not exactly true, although I can't say it isn't. But they're not seeing it in the detail we're seeing it. All right, in my stuff, you're not seeing that detail. This detail is just beyond belief detail, and that is the fluid-filled highway in mine. Now, so you've seen this. Let me just be sure you've seen the last of the things. Hold on. You know, I maybe didn't show you this, which is all the different layers of tissue that are in your gut and your colon and so forth, stomach, and what they absorb, and how detailed they are, and how important it is that you have the correct bacteria living in there, and it's flooded with bacteria, absolutely saturated with bacteria, because they make the enzymes. If you don't have the bacteria, and if you have certain species that are killed off, you're not going to have the enzymes they make, and if they're very, very important, you're going to have an issue. All right, so this is one of the things. These are all the different types of tissues and how they absorb things and discharge things, because a membrane allows things in and pushes things out. That's exactly how they work. Very sophisticated. Now, once again, I think I showed you the bacteria. If I didn't, here it is. And they spit out these ribosome balls, which are little tiny balls, can float through your body and through the blood-brain barrier, no problem. 1 million could fit in one single human cell. These are single-celled bacteria. They squirt these ribosomes out. They float around. They don't eat. They don't poop. They don't do anything. When they're needed, they spring into action and they become enzymes. Now, how do they become enzymes? Well, first of all, you have to have the bacteria. Second, the bacteria comes down and makes the ribosome, which is the protein chain. It transfers that into RNA, messenger RNA. It clips into your DNA, and they all use enzymes. I'm starting to remember I did show you all this stuff before, but you can't ever see it too often. This is how it works. The amino acids, and there's 20 of them, so that's just, the programming codes are just stunning. When you use binary codes, you got 1 and a 0. This has 20 for each one of these. So the program just absolutely staggeringly stunning. And this chain comes down and goes, and it programs the messenger RNA. That strand goes and snips into the DNA, which I think I showed you. It comes out, it comes up here, into the RNA, messenger RNA, snips right into the DNA, requiring enzymes. Everything requires enzymes. I think I made that extremely clear, I hope. Because if you don't have the enzymes, you're done. Now, these are the bacteria. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. AI might be able to identify if you have the bad ones or the good ones and what you should do about it. All right, we have all of these membranes I showed you in this block right here, sent to me by my good friend Greg Morrison. And every single, and thank you, Greg, and every single organ in your body has basically the same thing surrounding it. The membranes are and they have this fluid-filled highway. They all have it, every single one of them. All of that stuff has these fluid-filled highways and membranes surrounding it. There's nothing that doesn't have that, even blood cells. All right, so you saw all that stuff, You saw the giant hair follicle. I know you saw that. I showed that 10,000 times at least. All right, sebaceous gland, erector pili muscle, hair papilla at the bottom, root ball, hair shaft. So it's time to take this stuff into consideration and look at it a little closer. Don't forget, we were up in here, right up, snugged up against the lung. This thing here, these are the alveoli, and they're in the lung. So this was a chunk right on the outside of the lung. We're just touching the alveoli. That's the outside. All of this stuff. This is obviously not very detailed, but this is quite detailed. Okay, this next one's going to be a lot of fun. Everybody's talking about these holes that are in the rocks. They can't figure out what's going on. Who would have done this? What's going on with that? And they show that, and then they're showing this one over here. Look at this one. You got layer, 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 and then you got to that one. And then you got this one. Look at this. Look at all these layers going down inside. How perfect the formation of that is. Okay, my friends, I was talking about these shapes, and they don't give you much to go on. They just show you these little spots. For all I know, this could be modern construction. Who knows? Nobody knows. You need to get a bigger picture, first of all. But I have an idea what's going on here, and I have a little bit of input, but before I can make any kind of a determination whatsoever, you have to see it in full shots. And I had one the other day, which was a gigantic, enormous lung up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Unbelievable, but unfortunately, she stayed right up close to it, looking at it like this, and I never got a shot back far enough to get a real good determination of anything. Well, I did get I know exactly what it was, a lung. However, to see things in their proper perspective, you have to not only be close and see up right in here, and these little crevices and whatever is unusual, you want to emphasize, and then you want to back out so that everything is visible, and you can make it out into a comparison to what everything else is in that area, because it makes a huge difference. If what I'm saying is right, and it's biology, there are abrupt transitions. It could stop right here all by itself. You didn't have to cut that. It's all just like these things are layered here. We are built in layers. I'm telling you right now. Well, you can see. I'm going to tell you right now, I believe that's biology, and we're going to see if we can figure out what it is, but I need bigger pictures. Alright, I know this was supposed to be about evolution, and it is. This points out how silly the idea of evolution is. There's just a bunch of slime just sort of bumped into each other and started to do this and created this magnificent, unbelievable, incredible cacophony of interactions that is beyond human comprehension, so far beyond they can't comprehend it, so they just, no, it just happened. No, it didn't just happen. Something created this of some magnificent elegance that is just too staggering for the human mind to accept. And again, 98% of the DNA is unknown what it does. Identical twins come out virtually identical, and then they just change because of their experiences in life. I believe it's a record of everything you did in your life. If you could see 2% making everything of all of this and making it work and upkeep and all of that stuff, the other 98% could easily hold your entire life's memories. Basically everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever done, everything you've ever been upset about, felt remorse about, every feeling you've ever had could be stored in that 98%. I would see with no problem whatsoever. We are talking about scads of program storage capability, because you got 20 codes instead of 2. So that's 20, another 20, another 20. You could have like a half a dozen codes, and you got just an unbelievably elegant program. And when these things unfold, they unfold into an enzyme. Let me show you what an enzyme looks like. All right, this is the most important takeaway of the whole thing. These squirt out the ribosomes. The ribosomes contain the codes. They're these little balls. They unsheath and they open up to enormous enzymes and proteins. Enzymes break things down. Proteins build things up. You need them both. And here's what they look like when they unfold. They're gigantic. And every one of these is a magnetic signature that has to match whatever the magnetic breakdown of whatever it wants to do. And then it goes, done. And they can do millions, literally, and they claim this, and I'm not claiming it. Some of them even say billions of years worth of chemistry in less than a second. That's how elegant these things are. And it's just like click, 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 and they don't get used up. They just like, electrocute things. I call it click chemistry. They go click, 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 and they just wipe out everything in front of them. And I mean fast. Enzymes work fast. So that's the main takeaway here. You have to have the bacteria to create the ribosome, which is this ball, which unsheaths when it's triggered. See the trigger? The ball goes, pops open. and then it is so chemically active that it just goes done. Instant. I mean, just so fast that the human mind can't process that. And what it does is it does half-lives of all of the particles it's working with. So it breaks up and it decays them or bumps them up, whatever is required. You have to have some prebiotics for them to work on, yes, which means food and some, like I take Metamucil. That's a good prebiotic, I believe. I don't know. Seems to work. You have to poop regular every day. If you don't, you're not doing. You're going to have an issue sooner or later. Constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas, nausea, all symptoms of a problem with your digestive system, which is a problem with your enzymes, which is a problem with your bacteria. I don't know how much clearer I can be than that. So that's the lesson for today. Stay tuned. We're going to look into these puppies and see if we can figure this out. All right. Thank you. I love you all.